women's movement was kind of growing under my feet. I wasn't aware, actually, until I went to law school, the incredible amount of work that the feminist movement had done, which had paved the path for me getting there. I was very involved in the ideology, and I had a lot of radical friends, and we were doing projects that involved, helping women. And we were also very much involved in our own voices, like getting our voices up and out. In my life, the women have lost their voices literally. Like my mother didn't talk for 2 years, and I've got cousins who can't remember my maternal grandmother ever speaking. And my mom's sister, you had to stand really close to her, my funny Aunt Claire, because you couldn't hear her. And I was part of a movement with the women that I was living, working, and being with, of just getting used to expressing myself, like using my voice. But when I got to law school, I found that we were a class of women. There was more women in our class than between 1920 and 1975 combined. Like we were the first huge class of women. And all the women who had paved the way, to get us there. And here we all were. And I ended up practicing in an all-women's law firm for a quarter of a century. We now have men in it, which is just wonderful. But first of all, I practiced law with my dear friend, the late Leslie Pinder, for 25 years, and Chloe Ostrov and Brenda Gertner, all without a partnership agreement. Like we didn't, do it the same way men did. Like from a male perspective, and law is essentially a patriarchal way of thinking. Like it's only recently that we're starting to break away from that, where you've got like a woman who is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, and in that we're seeing the discourse changing, like the honor of the crown. It's more relationship based. We've been able to create that kind of shift in the law, kind of feminism in the law. The way that we did things fit with the Indigenous matriarchal societies. I actually do think that we were able to practice law in an all-woman law firm, and our clients felt safer because we were storytellers. Like we were all storytelling together. Like if there's no law for you, then all you've got is the stories. And so we just kept putting people on the stand, to tell their stories. And if the law didn't suit the facts, well, then it better change, because there's the only thing we brought into the courtroom was the stories of the people who we wanted to let those stories sing for themselves. And I don't think men would have done it that way. Like it's not precedent based. It's not logical. Like it's not that it doesn't have logic to it, but we weren't primarily concerned with the practicality of the law. In the early days of practicing law, is that as women, we were hopelessly underestimated. And it was such an asset. Like you have no idea when the other side doesn't think that you have a case at all and doesn't think what you have to say is going to make it because there's no law on your side. To be underestimated just gave us so much power, because then we could bring in everything we had to say and the way we had to say it. And we created a new energy, and the court started to swerve in our direction. The law that governed this country, Canada, was the law that we used to our advantage over and over again, because it was first spelled out in the Royal Proclamation. It was that the Crown was duty bound to recognize the occupation and the laws of the original people here. And then with the incremental perfection of Crown sovereignty through treaty, we would eventually have a joining in confederation. But that just didn't happen in BC. They just stole it fair and square. Like basically the law was used as a weapon. You can't potlatch, you can't, leave your reserve, you can't, hire a lawyer, you can't, and so it went. It was an instrument of violence. And so what was helpful for us is that because we were kind of outsiders in the law, we weren't men and we weren't working in big town law firms, and we didn't have, fathers that were judges and who, paved the way or whatever it was that. We didn't have any investment in the status quo to speak of. We could take the law, the higher side of the law, and hold it up against the lower forces in the law, and we could force the crown's feet to its own fire. And we were so willing to do that because we didn't have an investment in things continuing the way they did. We only had an investment in changing it. The feminist perspective that we were able to bring, just to the day to day. Like, we weren't even trying. It wasn't as if we had a big roadmap and somebody said, do it this way and not that way. We were just being ourselves in the world with one another, doing what we thought was the right thing to do with people who we loved and who loved us too. And it was just the way it unfolded. And it turned out that the feminist and also the matriarchal indigenous forces were so strong together that we were a force in the courtroom that the judges couldn't ignore. And eventually the law started to shape around us.